Hello and welcome to PMeVIDYA channels. You are watching channel number 11. I am with you Dharmender Singh, and also we are live streaming this session on NCERT official YouTube. This is for class 11. Let me introduce the topic, which is reading Discovering Tut The Saga continues for class 11 student. To learn more about this, I would like to welcome Ms. Gayatri Khanna. She is ELT expert. I welcome you, Ms. Khanna.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, dear children and teachers. So today we're going to talk about your lesson, King Tut. The saga continues. It's a very interesting lesson. In fact, even if you look historically, it has been of great importance, and so this chapter also has its own literary merit. So here we proceed with the chapter without much introduction. So here it is, that it was written by A.R. Williams. He is not such a well-known writer, but what the topic that he has covered, and he started writing at a very young age, and the topic that he has covered has a universal appeal, both literary and historically. It has immense value in literature as well as history. So here, when we talk in terms of Egypt, so first, to understand this chapter, probably this is one of the simplest chapters that you have. However, I will add my own information to make this chapter a little more interesting. So you know the location of Egypt, and we also know that the pharaohs, the kings or the rulers, pharaohs as they were called, their bodies were mummified because they believed in life after death. And so when they mummified their bodies, they also stored a lot of valuable things which the person would need in his afterlife. So here is a map of the older Egypt. So how is it located? It's located in the northeastern part of Africa, and it is surrounded by natural barriers. It has the Mediterranean Sea, and it has mountainous regions, and also it's a desert area. So when I was talking in terms of pharaohs, so you see at the top of the social ladder, you have the slaves and the servants, because we're talking of ancient history. The pharaohs or the rulers were at the top. They controlled the laws, and they controlled the land, they controlled the resources, and in fact it was the Egyptian people who believed that the pharaohs were next to gods. They worshipped them like gods. So therefore you realize the importance of a pharaoh. So now who was a pharaoh? The king or the ruler of Egypt was called the pharaoh. The pharaoh was seen as the god. Everyone worked for the pharaoh, and when the pharaoh died, he was mummified. The mummy or the dead body was preserved in a way that it was buried in beautiful tombs and with a lot of belongings that they would need in their afterlife. And the pharaohs had not only control over the laws, they could judge what is right and wrong, they could also have absolute control over trade, over crops, over resources, and they appointed leaders under them to look after the people. They were not only executive or judicial gods, they were also religious gods. Now, basically, if you see, people believed that the pharaohs caused the sun to rise just as Nile to flood, crops to grow. So that means it was the role of a pharaoh was as in whatever we breathe, drink, the pharaoh was supposed to be next to God over there. So now when we talk specifically of King Tut's tomb, now this is a tomb which was discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter. So you look at the locale of this tomb, it's surrounded by deserts, and this is the steps which go inside. We'll talk of the structure of the tomb and also what lay buried, and why did King Tut's tomb evoke so much of interest in the minds of the people. This is the entrance. So basically, this is the way the tomb is constructed. A little bit about the general King Tutankhamun's tomb, and then we come to the chapter. See, there are stairs, there's a passage, and for each thing, there was a specified thing what had to be done in each room. There's an annexi, there's a burial chamber, and there's a treasury. See, now the annexi, that was the smallest room. where they had oil, food, wine, dishes, pottery, such stuff. Look at the antechamber. The ante is before you actually enter the burial. This is a little bit of a small chamber which has 700 items, which included couches, chairs, basket, beds, stool, large statues. And then this passage was made of limestone. And the burial was the grandest room with paintings where the walls had murals. And what were these murals on the walls? What were they depicting? They were depicting the pharaoh's death and afterlife journey. What would happen to him in the next 24 hours till he went to another life? And then, of course, there was the treasury, which had all gold and silver, the 4 entrances to the room. Now, when we come to the unit that you have been reading, so what do you get to know through that? King Tut was the last heir of a powerful family that ruled Egypt. He died a teenager and was forgotten. So he came to power somewhere when he was around 9 years old, and he died about 10 years later. So if he ruled for such a brief period, why was he so important to us? Now, he was very important to us for a couple of reasons that we're going to discuss. But when was his tomb discovered and how was it discovered? His tomb was discovered on November 1, 1922. And when it was discovered, there were many questions that were raised. That is, the first and foremost, what was the cause of his untimely death? See, please let me tell you that his death at around 19 was untimely. He was known as the boy king because he died so young. Now, what caused his untimely death? But if you look at his ancestors also, people did not have the lifespans that we have today. His ancestors, they were ancestors which died at 27. They were his ancestors that died at 29, 30. Because it is the life expectancy is increasing now, but 19 was relatively young at that point of time also. Now, to ascertain his cause of death, his body was brought out of this tomb and a CT scan was done to ascertain. This was about in 2005 to ascertain the reason of his death. So now, when it was at 6 p.m. on January 5, 2005, that he was taken out of his burial tomb after a span of about 3,300 years. It's a very ancient mummy. So here you see King Tut and you see King Tut's wife. The little bit of information that I would like to add is when this tomb was discovered, there were two fetuses also over there. So that means they could have been premature babies that they had. Now, one thing which the chapter talks about is that when he was being dug out of the burial tomb and taken for a CT scan, there was a lot of mystery that surrounded it. It was like, the Greek tragedy. The weather was dusky, it was cloudy, it was eerie, it was mysterious. But once it was opened, multitudes of tourists came and they looked at the walls. They were curious and thoughtful both, and many feared that the pharaoh's curse would befall those who disturbed him from his sleep. So there were a lot of superstitions added to this. Now we talk of Mr. Zahi Hawass, who was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Intakes, that he said that the mummy, when it was the dead body or mummy it was made, as you know, when the vital organs were taken out, it was rubbed and filled with various oils or something to preserve, and then it was preserved. So that was the mummy. So when his mummy was taken out, it was in a very bad state. Why was it in bad state? Because Howard Carter, the archaeologist who was then excavating tombs nearby, had discovered him by chance, had discovered King Tut by chance. And then he had gone inside to sort of investigate the contents of the tomb. And it was the dazzling work of art and gold that had caught the attention. It's one of those richest tombs that one could find. And there were beautiful board games, there was food, there were linen, undergarments, and the linen over there, I believe it's preserved even today after thousands of years. And all that wine, everything had been buried with the pharaoh. So people were fascinated. And look at this, a couple of pictures please, and then we go on. He says when this Zahir Hawass, the Secretary General of the Antique Council says, when I saw his face, I was shocked. My heart was pounding. I could not speak because of the excitement. And what was it like? It was murals, it was gold, it was laden with things and treasures, probably one of the richest tombs to be found there. So this is the entrance to the tomb when people were leading in. This is Howard Carter and others outside the tomb. Here is Howard Carter at the entrance to the tomb. Steps. We just showed you the passage leading to the tomb. And here is the innermost chamber where there were treasures lying. Now, when Howard Carter, he took the mummy out, the mummy was in 3 boxes, one after the other. There were 3 boxes. And where this King Tut had been lying undisturbed for thousands of years, they were digging up a grave, a tomb nearby, and they had made an accidental discovery of King Tut's tomb. Now, King Tut, how was he buried? There was this stone-like container called the sarcophagus. There were 3 coffins to hold the body of the king. 2 were made of wood. They were covered with a gold sheet, but the innermost coffin was made of thick sheets of gold, and that costs millions of dollars today. Now look at Carter's inferences that he has drawn. Now Carter noticed that these 3 coffins, they were one within the other. In the first, which he opened, he found a burial cloth that was decorated with garlands of willow and olive leaves and lotus petals and cornflowers. This helped him conclude that the king was buried in March or April. See, an archaeologist. Now, you have to one more thing that you have to remember. When these coffins or these mummies were dug out, at that point of time, it was also the treasure, the gold, the silver, the things which were buried, they added a lot of value to it. But now our outlook has changed. We study history through that. We find out the reasons why the person died and what was the thing from history that can guide us to live a better life today. We learn from history. Then what had happened was that in the last coffin where the body was kept, the raisins, the nuts, the raisins, whatever was put over there, had solidified because of the heat, because it's put under that. And Tut's mummy was joined, sort of sealed with this to the bottom of the coffin. Now Carter had to take it out to study the body and study the coffin. So what he did was he put it in the hot sun of Egypt to loosen so that the raisins will melt and he'll be able to raise the body up. For a number of hours he put the body outside, but it was futile. He couldn't raise the body up. He had to sort of cut the remains of the king because he could not leave the body lying outside for days for the fear that the body would be robbed by thieves who would be, or looters who would be on the way. So he did not want to let the coffin out. So he dug it out. He sort of cut out the body and pulled it out. So here is Howard Carter, who's sort of pulling the body out of there. Now, what do we know about this boy king? He was only 9 years old when he succeeded, and he died at the age of 19, and he was buried in the Valley of Kings. It was found that his tomb, it was the first tomb, in 1922, it was the first tomb to be found in the 20th century, and it was the only one which had not been robbed. Between the time when the tombs were discovered, when they were discovered by archaeologists and historians, they had already been robbed. But this boy king's tomb had not been discovered, so had not been robbed. So this created a great deal of treasures, which was gold masks, jewelry, beautifully carved furniture. So now this is there was a lot of interest. How did he die so young? And obviously, he seems to be a very influential ruler, and he died at the age of 19. So, what was the cause of his death? He was a teenager. This is what had evoked interest. He was a teenager when he died. He was the last heir of a powerful family that had ruled Egypt for centuries. That was the end of an era over there. And there were some people who also felt that his successor, who married his widow later, must have assassinated him. So there were many theories which had shaped up. Here are the jewels and whatever is kept in the treasury for the king or the pharaoh to use in his afterlife. Now this was something which was found in King Tut's treasury, that maybe this was a chariot with one wheel, that probably he may have died of infection, or he needed a wheelchair like chariot to move on, and it was probably, or he died in an accident or some severe blow in a battle. This is what was the indicative. So now, as I had said, that there were murals which talk of this next life. So these were the murals cast on the tomb of this. And what did they talk about? They talked about the journey of Tut into the next world, the funeral profession, and what happened over there, how the gods opened to welcome King Tut. So these were the myths that were there. So since it was believed that the king could take all the things and use them in his next life, so everything of use, from food to clothes to drinks to jewelry to money, everything was buried, all ornamentation. And then when Carter, he pulled out, he cut the body, and then what he did was he collected everything and he put it back again. It was with more advanced technology in 1968, almost 40 years later, that when he was x-rayed, it revealed that his breastbone and front ribs were missing. Now, why were they missing? Were they missing when Howard Carter had pieced them out? And it could have been then. But then, anyways, the consequences and the facts of his death are still unclear. However, we know a little bit of the history of King Tut through this chapter as well, which has been documented. We'll talk about that. His grandfather, King Tut's grandfather, Amenhotep III, was a very powerful pharaoh, and he ruled for almost 4 decades. He was loved and worshipped by the people. Then came King Tut's father, which was the successor to the grandfather, obviously. But here, what he did was that he changed the capital. He sort of demolished the old faith, and he smashed the temples. So basically, it was also presumed that he had become gone a little crazy. So after the grandfather, for a brief period, came the father, who was not supposed to be a very well-loved ruler. But when King Tut came into power, like, this man was not only a good ruler and demolished, and he challenged the religious beliefs, he changed the capital, and then what he did was he caused a lot of financial loss as well. It was then when King Tut took the throne, and he reverted to the old ways of the grandfather. Therefore, this rule was supposed to be a happy rule. And despite being a happy rule, he died about 9 years later suddenly. So that was something that raised an alarm. So this is the family tree of King Tut that you see. The grandfather was a very popular ruler, ruled for almost 4 decades, and then came the father, who sort of challenged everything from religion to the capital to ways of governance. He challenged everything. But when King Tutankhamun came to power, he reverted back to the grandfather's days. So that was supposed to be a brief period again, where the people were happy. So therefore, he raised more interest. Now, to date, the Egyptian mummy project, that is when they're digging out or excavating mummies, 600 mummies have been discovered so far and is still counting, they're still being dug out. Now, the next stage is scanning, where the mummies are taken into a CT scanner. Now, King Tut was one of the first mummies to be scanned so that the modern technology could ascertain or could, say, identify or be sure of his reason of death. Now, as I said, that when his body was being dug out, there are many stories about this, that why the pharaoh's curse, they call it, that why they felt that King Tutankhamun had cursed the people who were excavating, because first the weather became airy, then people who were related with carving out or getting his body out, many of them died. Now, when he was put in a scanner, the $1 million scanner stopped functioning because there was a sand in the cooler fan. Now, it was, people believed that so many things happening when the pharaoh's body is being taken out, so this could be the curse. It was, of course, it cannot be a curse, but it is a superstition. It could be a curse, but then this scanner was rectified and the task was finished. Tut was carried back to his tomb and placed back in his coffin, but the CT scan revealed that there was nothing seriously that had gone wrong with King Tut. So that Zahi Hawass, the person, the Secretary General of the these artifacts in Africa, he was comforted. And finally, when he was replaced, the wind had stopped, the winter was cold and still, and there was a bright sky, everything had settled. So they said that it was like the Orion, the constellation watching, as if it was watching King Tut. So that is what your chapter is about, a few pictures, and then we talk of some of the questions. See, this is King Tut's, statues of Tut, all this is being found in King Tut's tomb. Boxes, shrine, gold, casket, game of chess, throne. So this is King Tut in the X-ray machine, 5 feet 6 inches tall, slightly built, very slim built, well fed, free of any disease. So this is what the reconstruction, as we call it, that through the CT scan, his face has been reconstructed. So this is what he could have looked like at that point of time. Now, a very quick recap. Now, what generated? This is something that you would all have to remember for the understanding of the chapter and also your assessment. What generated interest in the world of King Tut? See, first, he was a he was a teenager when he died. Second, he was an heir to a powerful family that had ruled Egypt and its empire for centuries. It was felt that he could have been murdered. And what were the unnatural things that happened? See, as you know, when CBSE assesses, it marks you for your value points. So you have to remember all the facts, because content is important, as important is the language. How did nature seem to echo the unnatural happenings? As he was taken out from his mummy, from his cemetery, the tomb where he was buried, it was dark clouds that scudded across the sky, and the whole day it was grey. So it was cloudy, it was unclear, the wind was angry, and there was a dust, like a dust storm, which was likened to the devils that were rising. Why did the tourists, they come together to see Tut's tomb? What was the reaction? The tourists came to the rock-cut tomb. This tomb was 26 feet underground. To pay their respects to King Tut, they had come. They gazed at the murals on the wall, the drawings, and the pictures on the wall of the burial chamber. The King Tut's gilded face and mummy-shaped outer coffin, which I have already, you've seen it in pictures. The coffin had a shape of a face, and like his own face. And some people, some visitors read from guidebooks in a whisper. Others stood silently, and they knew that it was the untimely death, and they feared the curse of the pharaoh, that it would befall the curse or the bad luck or the ill omen would fall the people who disturbed him from his sleep. Now, who was Howard Carter? What did he find? He was a British archaeologist who in 1922 discovered King Tut's tomb after years of unsuccessful searching. He found the richest royal collection ever and a lot of treasures in that, which caused a sensation later. How was it discovered that King Tut was buried in March or April? It was because of the flowers and leaves that were put on King Tut's burial, and these flowers and leaves which grew in March and April. That's what the linen of the shroud or the covering of the dead body was covered with. See, when he says that when he finally reached the mummy, though, he ran into trouble. This is Howard Carter. Why was it so? Because Howard Carter, he ran into trouble because he reached the coffin, he opened the coffin, it was 3-layered, but he could not raise Tut's body out because the raisins that were put around the body had solidified, and therefore that had glued the body of King Tut onto the base of the coffin. No amount of force could pull it out. So then what happened? How did Howard Carter decide to detach the mummy? First, he tried to put the mummy outside in the sun, in the scorching or the sweltering heat of Egypt. He put it out there for several hours, but in the blazing sun, but that did not sort of melt the resin so that he could lift the body. Then he decided to carve it out from beneath, from under the body. The limbs shrunk because there was no other way of pulling out the remains of the king, so he had to cut it out. Then you got to know what were the treasures, why were they put there. The royals or the pharaohs, they hoped to take the riches with them for their next life. King Tut was covered with glittering woods, precious collars, inlaid necklaces, bracelet rings, sheaths, finger rings, everything all made of pure gold. Very important, how has the viewpoint of archaeologists changed with the passage of time? Earlier, as I said, that the archaeologists focused only on treasures of the tomb, and now there is more focus on the intriguing mysteries of death. What was their rule like? What did they die of? And now we have more sophisticated tools, including medical technology, to ascertain the reasons of death, ascertain if there was any illness, ascertain if there was murder, and also to ascertain if they had died of certain illnesses. Now, what was the interesting fact about Tut that got to light in the late 60s? That it was discovered in 1968, because in 1922, as you know, Carter had dug out the body, and when he had collected everything and put the body back into the mummy, it was discovered that his breastbone and front ribs were missing. Why was King Tut's death supposed to be a big event? One, he died at the very young age, or between 18 and 19, and he was the last ruler of a very powerful dynasty. And the other thing was, he died very young, and he had restored all the goodwill that his grandfather had done. Although between him and his father, for a very brief period, there was yet another ruler, but that was a very insignificant ruler because he ruled for a very brief period of time. So this King Tut's father, basically he initiated a very strange period in the history of ancient Egypt. As I said, that the grandfather was good. He carried on the tradition, a good pharaoh, good ruler. Now, what did King Tut's predecessor do? He promoted the worship of Aten, the sun disk, changed the name from Akhenaten, the servant of Aten, and moved the religious capital from the old city of Thebes to the new city now, which is now present. As I said, that he moved the capital from one place to the other. Basically, he attacked the sun god and smashed all the religious places, and he closed the temples, he smashed the images. So what made the god remark? It was the curse of the pharaoh. It was because first that when the body was taken up, it was cloudy, it was windy, and then when it was taken to the scanner, this was $1 million, very expensive. You know, the scanning machines are common now, but very expensive then. It had stopped functioning because of a sand particle which hit the cooler fan. So the guard jokingly remarked that the king had expressed his annoyance at being disturbed. With King Tut finally laid to rest, the nature was at rest too. As I said, the sky was clear, the constellation of stars seemed to be watching, the dust cloud has settled, so that means he was finally laid to rest. Now when we talk in terms of assessing this chapter, so you have to, other than the historical facts, if you have to see the literary merit in the chapter, if you see when we read about Shakespeare, we talked of the weather, of the nature, it echoes the problems of human beings. Especially here, nature echoed the unnatural happenings with King Tut's body. See, when the body was taken out for forensic reconstruction, after death reconstruction as to what had happened, the winds were infuriated. They were raising dark dust clouds which were like devils, and they were shrouding, they were covering up the stars and the coffin. The body was put to the scanner and the scanner stopped functioning. And when it was finally laid to rest, the sky became clear, the constellation of stars was visible, and the dust cloud had settled.
Well,
So
Ms.
the-
Khurana, I would like to tell you here, we have only 5 minutes left now to continue this session.
Okay, so the mummy was in a bad condition because of what Carter did in 1920s. What did Carter do and why did he do it? In 1922, he hurriedly, when he was looking for King Ramses' tomb, and he landed on King Tut's tomb. So what he did, he hurriedly searched the contents, and there were artifacts, there were gold, there were treasures, the body was cemented to the base of the coffin with reasons. So to prevent, first he put it outside for a few hours, but then it was separated. So he did not want to leave the body out. So to prevent it, he chiseled, he cut the body free and then, so almost every joint had been cut off. Now what do we get to know about his lineage? I have already spoken about it. The King Tut's grandfather was a powerful ruler who ruled for almost 4 decades at the height of 18th dynasty's golden age. Very popular ruler and very successful ruler, and a person who ruled for very long, 4 decades. And his son who succeeded him, who was King Tut's father, he basically destroyed all that his father had done, whether it was places of worship or whether it was basically, there was also what you do not have in this unit is that he destroyed the economy as well. And then after that, there was a brief period where there was another ruler who came in, and then he disappeared without any trace. And then it was followed by King Tut. King Tut, as I said, was called the Boy King, a very young ruler, and who ruled for 9 years, tried to restore the golden age of his grandfather, and died mysteriously, which led to our attention to the coffin and how he was buried. So, are there any questions, please? Could we find out?
Well, I just wanted to know one question because we are talking about class 11 here. So how easily is that? I mean, what tips we can use to understand the concept easily? Because there are some typical terms as well in the textbook. So how we can develop that approach to understand these terms easily, so we can actually admire the whole concept of the particular topic.
That's right. So basically, as I said, that the children have to study it from twofold importance. One is the historical importance, one is the literary merit of the chapter. Historical, the children know about the mummies, they know about Egyptian mummies, and they know why they were dug out and why they were placed in mummies. First of all, they dug out the artifacts, the beliefs of afterlife and their rules. And the second is how nature, this boy king who remains a mystery, we do not know much about the rule, we are just piecing history together to learn a little bit about history, and also the literary elements in the chapter which talks about nature, which talks about the attitude of the archaeologists then and now.
Right.
These are the things that they have to focus their attention on.
Great. As we all know that schools has reopened again, so any message would you like to deliver to the students, ma'am?
I think it's been a very, very difficult period for the children to learn online, because it's as difficult for us to talk, because when we do not know the audience, they're missing out on social interactions. I'm sure we have tided over the wretched pandemic, and once again togetherness, a happy situation both for the teachers as well as students, and wishing them all the best for their examinations, which begin on the 26th of
Absolutely. So it's a big responsibility on the shoulders of the both students and the teachers as well. But yes, of course, we can do this. So thank you so much, Ms. Khurana, for your valuable time to narrate us such a beautiful session to our audience. So thank you so much once again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much all the viewers for watching this program. Next is for class 12 student, subject is mathematics, and there we are going to understand integration after a short break of time. Stay with me.